Anupam Mittal ordered the gums 9 months before we went on Shark Tank. And I happened to see that on my Shopify because I stalk all these customers' names and try to figure out who are these guys, right? He said, chewing gums are something that people usually get excited about, but putting the sustainable angle, even in that, like, why can't you just let it be?
If your activism isn't for the poor, then it isn't activism. The work we've done so far doesn't reach everybody quite yet.
Start small, get super confident with your numbers. People who you're speaking to will respect you as a female founder if you actually know what's going on in your business. Normal dairy milk costs anywhere between like 65 to 90 rupees a litre. Plant-based milks on average are about 260 rupees. How does the common person in India afford that?
But it's not that plant-based milk is inherently more expensive. It is only more expensive because you put in a Tetra Pak and then you're only manufacturing maybe 10,000 liters at a time, where the dairy industry is giving you 3 lakh liters.
If we were to do any kind of financial mechanism to help incentivize, reduce GST, 0, 5%. When the first GST regime came in, my product had a 27 GST.
Oh my God.
So what's the incentive for people to get into the business, and what's the incentive for consumers to adopt that product?
Exactly.
What would Ambani do? If an Ambani ever decided to enter the plant-based space, the space would go from 150 crores to 1,500 crores.
100%.
Oh, in a day.
What are they doing? They also have the same problem with pricing and procurement and everything. It's maybe that
Welcome to today's episode where we're diving into the journeys of 3 impact-driven founders who are changing the way India thinks about sustainability. I honestly believe the need for every business to be a sustainable business has become so essential, but of course it's not easy. Today we're talking to 3 pioneers who've taken on this challenge and succeeded in creating brands that are sustainable, impact-driven and ethical. We'll explore what it takes to survive and thrive as a sustainable business in India, balancing profit with purpose and adapting to an evolving market. First up, we have Mayank Nagori, who's the co-founder of Good Gum, India's first natural, biodegradable and plastic-free chewing gum, also seen on Shark Tank. Next up, we have Sahar Mansoor, who's the founder of Bare Necessities, a zero-waste personal and home care brand. She's a true sustainability advocate, a co-author of a zero-waste book called Bare Necessities. 2 things we share in common: she's also a World Economic Forum Global Shaper and a climate reality leader. Last but not the least, we have Abhay Rangan, who's the co-founder of OneGood, one of India's largest vegan dairy brands, that he started when he was just a teenager with his mum. Abhay is not only an entrepreneur, but also an animal rights activist and a passionate community builder, creating a powerful shift towards plant-based choice in India. Mayank, Sahar, and Abhay, welcome to Sustainable Tea with Shreya, and thank you so much for being here with me in Bangalore today. Let's kick off with this. I want to start off by asking you all, what is the one myth about sustainable or vegan businesses that you're constantly working to dispel? If your customers could know one thing about what you work on, what would it be?
Oh, starting with me? Okay. I think maybe the main thing, and this is probably going to be a life mission for me, it is that it's expensive. That's the myth I'm trying to dispel. I read a long time back ago that said a poster or something that said, if your activism isn't for the poor, then it isn't activism. And it struck me, right? And maybe the work we've done so far doesn't reach everybody quite yet, but it remains a directional sort of principle for us and me specifically as well. I think we just spoke about it. I think the most sustainable things often tend to be by default cheap because you are consuming fewer resources to begin with, right? So from a first principles perspective, it's cheaper. For example, a belt you have for 10 years is a lot better than a belt you change every year because it breaks or whatever. So in general, long-lasting things, sustainable things that reduce your consumption are by default cheaper. I think that is a principle that I want to take to every vehicle of impact that I'm involved with. So I think the main thing I want to dispel is that being sustainable is expensive.
I love what you said about activism. If it's not for the poor, it's not activism. Whereas I think obviously the top 1% are the problem. When you talk about the amount of carbon emissions, the bottom 50% versus the top 1%, which is why I feel like sustainability and veganism should be aimed there first. And they are the influencers. People aspire to what they have. So are you saying it's mainly we do our activism or we target the masses, or should we try to change the elite? And this applies to all of you.
Yeah, I can maybe kick off with it. I think it's going to go that way anyway, regardless of your intention. For example, if you launch a product and the volumes are low, then your price will be higher and it'll appeal to a specific group of people who maybe have the ability to purchase it. And over time, I think as your volumes increase and your economies of scale get better, you tend to be able to reduce the price and therefore increase the net. But I think there is a counterintuitive thing here that's important. I think if you have enough resources to begin with, if you have enough starting capital, you can break that. And that's maybe what OneGood tried to do, right? We didn't price our milk at 300 or whatever to begin with. It would have made economic sense, and we certainly would have avoided a lot of pain. But we had enough starting capital to really swing for the fences. So we started with something that was half the price to begin with. And we didn't quite get to price parity with dairy, but I think given enough starting capital, given enough favorable starting conditions, you can break that and see what happens, right? And I think there are not enough people attempting this maybe step, and maybe it is more common sense to go this way, sort of maybe target the elite and then go downward or broader. I think downward in this context seems bad, but broader. But I think you can strike a middle ground pretty early on if the ambition is large enough.
What about
Yeah,
you?
for sure.
Shreya?
I was also thinking about price, because I think whenever people think about sustainability, they automatically assume like a much higher premium and a higher price. And I think it's definitely economies of scale problem and also a solution. And from a Bare Necessities perspective, we actually have revised the prices twice when we've hit versions of scale. So our bamboo toothbrushes, when we first started in 2016-ish, were like 230, right? And now we're on the 100 range. So we've actually, whenever we hit some versions of scale, when we were able to negotiate with our suppliers to reduce the cost of raw materials, we immediately, instead of increasing our own profit, we wanted to kind of share that cost with consumers to make it more easy and accessible for people to try a product. And especially a bamboo toothbrush, because it's such a great like entry point to get started into thinking about, that's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning.
Start a journey.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's a very low-hanging fruit. It's also something that is a recurring purchase.
Yeah.
So if you buy it once, you like it, and then you just, kind of subscribe to it or buy a bunch or whatever. So I think that was the intention there. And then I think the other one is that sustainable products are not as effective as, the traditional FMCG products, with lots of chemicals, with the ads of someone in distress in a sari and the world is black and white, and then you use this beautiful shiny thing and your dishes are all beautiful and your restrooms are all gorgeous, and then, traditionally like blue and green and things like that. And those are like super effective. I think that's another myth on like the FMCG product front that we're really trying to solve. It doesn't need to be, everything does not need to be lather to that extent. Although all of our products lather, because that's something that it'll take forever to kind of explain from the kind of behavioral point of view from consumers. But yeah, just kind of breaking that myth that sustainable products are not as effective as the mainstream alternatives.
Yeah, because it's chemicals, right? If you're washing your clothes and your plates with that many chemicals, you're also ingesting it at some point if you're eating off those plates.
Yeah.
So both of you have that sustainability is expensive or veganism is expensive myth that you're trying to dispel from what you do. What about
Mine
you?
is a mix of both. I mean, we solve for, say, not just sustainability, but even natural products, right? Like the chewing gum is a product that people have been consuming artificially flavored and artificially colored all these years. So that's become their comfort zone, that, every chewing gum taste should last as long, but it has tons of like these artificial sweeteners in it. And changing that aspect will take a lot more effort. Like I think to add here, when Sahar launched her bamboo toothbrushes, I think she was probably one amongst the first. And now it's become so mainstream that there's so many manufacturers become much more cheaper.
Yeah.
So I think competition in that space is nicer because the reach does get broader. So I would love to have more brands come in this space, because you're targeting the same consumers, and overall the product becomes cheaper, and like it's the same education that goes ahead. So I think it's like a communion of sorts, where I think every consumer of OneGood, every consumer of Bare Necessities is definitely a consumer of Good Gum as well. So sustainable products are not tasty. Sustainable products are not for me, because I don't care, right? So how do you make it cooler, or how do you get more people to pick it up, right? Like it's not enough. I think when we started Good Gum, it was it was a planet-friendly chewing gum. But now when I pitch, I say it is a better for you chewing gum, because we realize in India people want sustainability, but they don't want to pay a premium for it. So if I'm an expensive chewing gum, just being planet friendly is not enough. I need to say, hey, you're ingesting plastic, you might die with that plastic. That's like a alarming signal to them. And if sustainability does come, then that's a brownie point. They don't want to pay premium for it. So I think debunking that myth and making it a little bit more mainstream, a little bit more easier for people to take up.
Yeah, for sure.
With a lot more alternative brands coming up in that space, it'll become easier, I feel. Up until now, there were no alternate brands, but now three of us are sitting here on this table. So
It's a big one too, sir, because people don't know that they're ingesting plastic or
Yeah.
chewing edible plastic when they're chewing gum. I didn't even know this about tea bags that we use. They
Yeah.
have plastic as
Yeah.
well.
Sunscreens have plastic in
sunscreen,
them.
all of it,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
these products. But
Yeah.
chewing gum is such a big one because you just do that on the go and you
Yeah.
don't realize what's in it.
Yep.
And Singapore's also banned it. I was in
Yes.
Singapore 6 years.
Yeah.
They banned chewing gum
Yeah.
Oh.
for I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
reason.
It was a huge
Vandalism,
public
but
litter problem.
yeah, it was a huge. I mean, it doesn't biodegrade as well, right? It will take hundreds of years, I
So
believe.
like the British government spends like close to about 50 million pounds or something a year to
Cleaning.
just
Wow.
clean up chewing gums from their streets. So
Wow.
imagine the
Jeez.
amount of
Waste of
Yeah,
resources,
So and it's sticky, right? So you can't unless and until somebody manually scavenges it, it can't be recycled, right? Any other plastic. I'm a chemical engineer. I know plastic is a great material, but it's just not used well enough, right? If there was
Yeah.
a good life cycle around plastic products, I think in packaging, if in when I was studying in the UK, nobody ever said don't use plastic. They said know how to segregate your plastic. So
Yeah.
people there are woke enough to take that dhakkan of the Coke bottle, put in one bin, and then the bottle of Coke in the other bin, and they know for a fact that it'll get recycled. So that education about sustainability, veganism has to just become mainstream in a country like ours, so
Yeah.
that there are more takers for it.
But although we say okay we're recycling, but the stat worldwide is that only 9% of the waste is actually getting recycled. So, and I think just a little bit about like the more like social justice angle, where is waste traditionally going? It's
in the
disproportionate,
landfills.
landfills, but where are landfills located?
Or
Disproportionately low,
countries.
Yeah.
low income
Recovering
neighborhoods.
colonies.
Whether you're in America and it's a low income Latino or African American neighborhood,
Yeah.
or in India, and how many years have kind of the, so to say, developed countries been shipping their waste to India? And even over here, where are they located? They're definitely not next door to where we are right now, right? So I think that's another kind of issue. When we're trying to break myths around it, we're saying, hey, why don't we reimagine different products altogether that are, why can't we have a milk that isn't kind of in this more traditional sector that is been polluting, is harmful?
Yeah.
Why can't you consume in a way that is with less plastic?
Yeah.
So all of our solutions are more preventative in nature in the first place, and also reimagining a cleaner, better, more just, more
Yes.
equitable
More
world.
proactive than reactive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's so important.
I wanted to add one more point on price. I think, and we remarked a little earlier that you see a lot of sustainable brands not making it, and I think there is a vicious cycle one can get trapped in, which is you start with a high enough price, and because you've outpriced it, your demand never increases,
Yep.
and because your demand is less, you have to price it even higher to sustain,
Correct.
and you're sort of in this bad cycle, and each problem makes the other much worse, and that's when you get caught in this death spiral, and you kind of, as a startup, die. To Sahar's credit, she's managed to actually reduce the
Reduce the
price,
price.
and that's an example of a success story. And maybe that's
So
because you
kind.
started at the right price,
Mm.
right? And I think if had it been twice the price or thrice the price that you started off with, it might have gone the other way, and maybe there wouldn't be a bamboo toothbrush industry in India today.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to also realize we're custodians of the movement in some sense. Our startups are a vehicle of our impact, and there's many other vehicles that we'll be a part of. But I think it's so important for the early ones to survive, because if you don't survive, then the funding dries up. It's another vicious cycle, and the funding dries up, more
And
startups
it
die.
puts out a wrong example of sorts, like people
Yeah.
wanting to start up in that space, maybe say, okay, because he failed or they failed, maybe even I would fail.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
A lot
Because
of
so many
people-
businesses have come and gone. So
Yeah,
many businesses
yeah,
have
yeah.
gone bankrupt. So many
Yeah.
businesses are finding it really hard to survive.
Yeah.
So how do you break that cycle? Because if
Honestly-
you're starting off, of course, if there's no economy, if there's no demand and if there's no scale, you can't reduce your pricing.
I think
So
you
how
just
do
got to stay put, because I think in India there's 135 crore people. There's a market for everything. An expensive product, a cheap product, a bad tasting product, a good tasting product. There's a market for everything. So I think if you're
Just stay in the game.
the longer you're in there, you will figure your market out. I think the only people who shut down are the guys who've been around only for a year and a half. You stay there for a longer run. I think a lot of people also have it wrongly set in their mind that probably starting up is a marathon, but is a sprint. But I think it's a marathon. You go slow and steady. I don't want to break things and be in 1,000 stores overnight. I'd probably grow that from 10 to 100, 100 to 500, and then slowly grow, because identifying where it sells, what sells, etc. So if people are ready to take that steady growth, I don't think anything would fail here. If your product is good, there is a market for it, for sure.
Totally agreed, to a lot of your points. But I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about like mental health and kind of what everyone has been through as founders. I think we've lived at a very unique time. Like we've dealt with the pandemic. We had to pivot our businesses. We had to continue to, we had to, in extraordinary circumstances, something that we could have never thought of, had to reinvent distribution or alternative revenue streams. Like I know for Bare Necessities, the demand for soaps were the highest, and and I couldn't produce right at that time. My oil primarily comes from Kerala. The interstate borders from Kerala to Bangalore to Karnataka were closed. So, I mean, we had to create, and we've always been excited about creating information and making it easy and accessible. And we've always done talks and workshops. So we created online courses around sustainability, and we had to create these alternative sources of revenue to keep everyone's jobs, and it was hard, I think. So I think this kind of realm of entrepreneurs have also been through a lot. And I think at some point you also kind of run out of steam. And, you might not have the social ecosystem, the financial ecosystem, or the mental ecosystem to continue. And because I have definitely seen like so many businesses in just even weeks earlier have announced that they're closing, which breaks my heart, but I also like understand because of these extraordinary times and circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you said about it just having been a firefighting thing for many, many years now. And certainly in the context of what I just said, by no means am I, I have utmost respect for people who have tried and failed, because they've done, it could have been very easily, everybody, all of us on the, having shut down our companies just any number of times these last couple of years. So it's, I don't think we should say failure is bad in that context. It is simply an experiment that didn't succeed and you didn't have enough money to do another experiment. I think your runway gives you an outlook onto how many experiments you can do per month or per year and so on. And you keep iterating until you get it right. And even when you get it right, it's hard because not only you're working with fragmented distribution, you're working with regulatory capture, you're working with so many things. And generally, I saw this meme that said, India is not for beginners, right?
100%.
And certainly, I think I've aged quite a lot emotionally, having done all this. It's a great insight into life, but I know that it is just so easy to have just folded. And I can, when I stare into the abyss, sometimes I see all the moments where we would have been having a very different conversation today. And it was just as likely, if not more likely, than the other outcomes. So, I mean, it's maybe glib to say that we can take lessons from failure, but not all failure has lessons. Sometimes you're just out of luck. Ryan from The Office says, Dwight says to Ryan, sometimes you just fail, right? And there's not a lot of lessons there sometimes. And that's just, I mean, I wish I could offer something that says, hey, here's something you can do to prevent failing, or like this is something that will give you success. That's just gyan, and it's free and it's cheap. But there's very few things that even I think I know at this point as to what works and what doesn't. More so maybe the one thing that is going to help you is to love the problem enough to continue
the passion,
keep going at bat. When you're 9 wickets down and you're the person who has to go through the finish line, maybe the love of the game is what takes you there, and maybe that's what makes a difference. But how to bat, how to bowl, I don't know that I have better answers than other people.
I don't think there's any textbook kind of formula that'll tell you here's how to start up or here's how not to fail, etc. It's just different people solving different problems in their different ways, right? So I think that
There's so many
perseverance
factors
and
outside
grit.
your control as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
There's
you
so many
can,
things
all
can't
you can do
control.
is the things that are in your control, and if
Yeah.
you're like honest and if you're passionate enough to solve that problem, I mean, you'll cross the line. Like, just to add another line, Anupam Mittal ordered the gums 9 months before we went on Shark Tank. And I happened to see that on my Shopify because I stalk all these customers' names and try to figure out who are these guys, right? And I just hit him up on WhatsApp. I asked him, "Hey, did you like the gums?" He said they're awful, they're terrible. He said, chewing gums are something that people usually get excited about, but you're putting the sustainable angle and the natural angle even in that. Like, why can't you just let it be? And good luck to you as to how you're going to scale this. And I said, okay. That was one of the darkest days in my good gum career. But I got back to office and I said, okay, how do we turn that around? And 9 months down the line, we got a check from him in the tank. So, I mean, if you know, I mean, I know my chewing gum the best. I know what I can do. So if you're passionate about the problem, you can turn anybody's feedback, or you can kind of steer your ship through any storm that
Yeah.
comes your way.
What were the problems that you were trying to solve individually? What was the driving force that made you go like, this is an issue, this is a problem, and I want to commit my, almost a decade or 2 decades solving this problem? What was that?
So, I mean, in our case, the name says it. It's good gum. We want to be the good amongst the bad, and I am like a whole and soul food tech person. And when I go into a supermarket, I see so many substandard products being sold. Something high on salt, something high on sugar, things probably that wouldn't even qualify to sell on European or American shelves, selling here in India. And there has to be some brands that come in and solve that problem. And the easiest place to start was the chewing gum aisle, because in my earlier days, I used to do sales for a brand of women's healthcare, and I used to sell beverages. And I realized that chewing gums usually are at the billing counter by default, whereas snacks, beverages are super hard to sell because it's a very competitive space, right? You need to pay a lot of premium to put your products in like the nicer shelves. You need to pay a premium, but chewing gums by default are at the billing till. I don't need to pay them. It's right there. And that's something that nobody was disrupting at all. There was a very sticky cue to it, which said, "Okay, all your chewing gums are plastic. This is not." So that's something that just rings a bell. Even if people don't end up buying it, would somehow know that, okay, this product exists, right? So both business wise and ethic wise, it kind of made sense that, okay, how do I put a product in the space where everything else is bad and I could be the good there? And I think that's the same journey that we're going to take with the products that we bring in next. So probably candies or even chocolates, etc. Be the good amongst the bad. So that's basically the problem. And we happen to be vegan as well. Chewing gums usually have a little bit of wax, a little bit of gelatin in some cases, but the way we make it is like very minimal number of ingredients. And that's why we are vegan.
Was that the same for you?
Yeah, for me, honestly, it was a combination of things. I love nature. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in nature with my dad, and like it kind of became this way for me to reconnect with him even years after he passed. And then I studied sustainability. I was a huge environmental nerd. I wanted to be an environmental professor, so I studied environmental law, environmental economics at Cambridge, and I was on that path. So really, energy access and waste were some things that I was constantly drawn to in my research and all of that. So everyone in office knew that I was like a bit of a trying to really minimize my waste footprint. So while my avenue really was the rural projects, for fun, they put me on an urban project, which was working with a waste picker community very close to Bangalore airport. And obviously, like Silicon Valley of India, we're like so fancy, the airport is beautiful. And then it's just crazy that so close to that is this community of like more than 500 households, no roof above the head, loot up homes, and things like that. And I really got to spend time with the community. We worked on a solar panel. We put solar panels on the chai kaddi. So every morning when they come for their morning chai, they plug in their battery. They go on for a day's work, come back, and they have this fully charged battery that they plug into their solar lantern. And obviously, I was feeling really great about myself, and I was like, yeah, this is why I came back, like impact, blah blah. But it was in my mornings, like following them, looking at our waste infrastructure systems, the lack of infrastructure systems even, and also just trying to see how there was like this young emerging Indian brands that were being built for, the new Indians, the younger Indians. But unfortunately, everything was still packaged in plastic. Everything was still kind of following a very traditional FMCG kind of approach. And I was like, I think there are other people who are looking to consume more mindfully, more ethically, more, with more values at the heart of what they're currently consuming. And that's how Bare Necessities got seeded. So it was very accidentally. It was from a problem first perspective, and trying to apply everything I learned in the impact space in my work to say you can create a business that has goals that are social, environmental, and economic, that are all very much congruent to one another. Because also, Selco India, they are a private limited, and their end users, you think the poor, you have to just do like handouts and philanthropy. No, the end users are paying for our products. You just have to make a more flexible payment mechanism for them. And they really broke that myth in so many ways. And that's kind of what I want to apply to Bare Necessities, that I don't have to pick between the planet and my balance sheet.
Yeah.
I can do it
both
all.
Together.
I can do this while creating some amazing kick-ass jobs for these amazing women.
Yes.
We have a 100% woman-run production team that I'm
Love
super
it.
proud of.
Love it.
Most of them did not have a bank account, never had health insurance before joining Bare, and are just trailblazers, and so much respect for everything that they're doing. So, and that's been my favorite part of building Bare, is like really the women.
I second
That's
that.
so
I mean,
cool.
70% of my workforce is women as
Oh,
well. And
nice.
they're like the most punctual people. They just throw at the job. Like,
Absolutely. So grateful, so excited.
yeah.
Love Bare, like, and the way they talk about Bare too is like, there's just so much like ownership,
Mm.
and I just love that so much.
Yeah, my team's 90% women as well,
Wow.
which is pretty cool. What was your not the Eureka moment, but what was your driving force?
It's been animal protection all through. I think, it has to be. I think if you're really interested in building something large in this space, you have to necessarily accept that you will disrupt animal agriculture. And if that's not a part of your personal value system, I think it's going to be very hard to do something. You can do something quirky and cool, but I think if you want to do something very disruptive, you have to accept that it's not even a sufficient condition; it's a necessary condition. I mean, so it's important that you subscribe to that, and that's been the case for me. My family turned vegan like 15 years ago. Now, when we were, there's people who've been vegan longer than us in India, but we were certainly one of the first waves of people to go vegan. And we've seen how the movement was then. And very early on, I became an animal rights activist. Every Saturday and Sunday, I would stand in front of the KFC in Indiranagar and just hold a poster that says "Don't kill hens" and
Wow.
things like that. I've done some very interesting things. I've walked into KFCs while people were eating and then like said things like, "Hey, the what you're eating involved the murder of all these hens by KFC, a corporation that pays to make this happen." Certainly don't think I have the courage to do that today. But you're a teenager, right? And you've got all these.
But like, just to cut you off, like,
How
what
was
was the
that?
kind of feedback?
Yeah, what was the
response?
response? How did people react to you?
They reacted fairly well. I thought several people were quite interested. I know I've certainly seen people like take a look at what they were eating, but you always ask yourself, is that the best use of your time? I don't know. There's no data to say anything like that. I think people tend to say, you ask any activist who's specialized in one form of activism, be it like leafleting or protesting, they'll be like, they love their own solution. They're like, I think what I do is very effective. I don't know if it's effective or not. I think you just need to experiment a bunch and see if you like something. And that's maybe step one. But during one of these events where we were doing, I think we had a VR headset and someone donated a bunch of iPhones to us. And I think it was Peter that had a VR compatible slaughterhouse video.
Wow.
And you just like put on the headset and you look around, you're like in a slaughterhouse. And we were doing this campaign and somebody was walking right past us, and I asked, "Hey, do you want to see this?" And this person said, it's being vegan is cool. I want to do it, but I think it's expensive. And right or wrong, I think if you're not looking for plant-based alternatives, being vegan can be quite cheap.
Yeah.
But the caveat is if you want something high protein, and I think India should consume more protein. I myself am prioritizing a lot more protein in my diet, etc. I think plant protein in current consumer formats is quite expensive. So we must take that criticism, right? It is valid and it is fair, and it must change. So I went back home and spoke to my parents about this and said, maybe there's something we can do. So we started what was then, we called it Vegan Arc, right? And then it became Good Milk and now OneGood and now Nourish You. So in the first avatar of this thing, it was really about giving people something that was so cheap that they would stop complaining that veganism was expensive. And by no means did I ever think it would be a commercially viable thing or it would even grow to the level that it did. I didn't fancy myself as a business person to begin with. Maybe now I feel a little differently. My goal was like, I'll do engineering, go do a job till 30 and maybe start a business later. I've always wanted to start a business. One of my early mentors, he started a group called, his name is Vidyacharan. Unfortunately, he's no more today. But when I was 16, he started a small group called Entrepreneurship for Animals. And the whole thing was, you be selfish, earn a lot of money, and then give it to the animal protection movement. And it allowed me to channel my ambition. And generally you have ambition as a teenager, right? Like, I want to do something big. But I'm like, oh my God, I want to do something big, but now for this cause. And it takes a selfishness out of it. And for whatever reason, even if philanthropy ultimately does make you feel good, it is a better framing of the problem in my mind. So it all aligned, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and it just happened a lot sooner than I thought. And I certainly think we were in the right place at the right time. At that point, actually, in the vegan movement, you had a few vegan businesses, and there was almond milk at 800 rupees that was imported and stuff like that. And
800 rupees.
800 rupees a liter.
Everything came from Thailand or something.
Yeah, something like that. There was, I know there was Silk in India at some point. It's obviously a US company.
Yeah.
And I think Namdari's had it long time back. This was like maybe 2014, 2015 types. And a lot of people were complaining that plant-based products are expensive, even in the vegan community, all these groups. But nobody ever said the quiet part out loud. Nobody made it a central premise of their mission. And I think we were the first to do it. And I think it struck such a big chord with the community that we got so much support overnight. I mean, I think it's very hard to do that today.
Yeah.
So if I had to replicate the exact same things I did, I don't think it would work out today because there's a lot of noise now. There's a lot of brands in the space. Everybody's competing for attention. But back then, I think this key theme that people complained about, they grumbled about it, but nobody had ever articulated in a way that that people felt like they could rally behind. And a lot of community support came our way. I mean, I remember I did a lot of deliveries myself in the early days, and at some point we had vegan ice cream made by someone, and I took it to somebody, and it was all melted. The thing was leaking out of an unbranded pouch, and I was like, "I'm so sorry. Can I give you a refund?" And the person said, "You know what? I'll pay full price for this." And then they put it in their freezer. I don't know if they ate it or not, but
that's
it's
the kind
just
of support that pushes you.
Yeah,
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, people were so forgiving because I think they personally resonated with the mission statement. And of course, I had a track record of being an activist. So I think a lot of things fell in line. And that's kind of how I think the journey was then formalized for me, more so than me doing anything about it. Yeah.
I feel like all of you just fell into it. Like it sort of just came to you. I don't think you went looking for it. It's just something you all stumbled
And
upon.
that's the reason probably why we're all here. I mean, like if I think I see a lot of entrepreneurs, they let's identify a problem. Let the problem come to you and then solve it. If you're out there doing your reverse engineering, saying this is a large market, if I build something in this space, maybe I'll end up getting some funding and then I could grow my company. I think that's the wrong approach. I think if the problem walks to you and you're solving it, then that's a little bit more sustainable to build a business in. A lot of people have failed. They say a friend of mine wanted to do kombucha because everybody was doing kombucha, and then it didn't work out. Like he was not passionate enough about
product itself.
Yeah.
I will caveat that. I think in a large enough market, you can get away with it. I think Netflix is a great example of smart people who are trying to look for a business, and then they found it and they made it big, and they weren't necessarily passionate about movies or like giving entertainment to people. I think there was just a bunch of Silicon Valley types that were smart enough and got to a problem and solved it compellingly. But the stipulation is that the market has to be really large. I think in smaller markets where death is very chasing you all the time, I think then you have to be a little more careful, a little more, your heart has to be in it. And it's important, I think, because I would love for the plant-based space in India to be so lucrative that you get all types. Maybe it's not there today, but I've certainly, a lot of great success stories, I think, very personally inspired by this brand called Cosmix. I think they've also, they were on the tank, right? And I think they've done so well. And I'd met the founder before Cosmix was as big as it is. And
She was supposed to be here today with us.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
she's a
great.
dear friend.
She had a shoot.
Oh.
Vibha had a shoot. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love Cosmix. I think one of the best plant-based protein brands I've ever tried.
100%. Had one this morning.
Shout out to
Have it every day.
Cosmix.
And like, they're a great brand that we look at very closely because we have a protein powder as well. And I'm always like, wow, they took the market overnight. Maybe it wasn't overnight from their perspective, but as an observer of the market and a participant, I think their meteoric rise has been very inspiring. I think Good Dot is another company that inspires me a lot.
Again, great guy.
Yeah,
Great product.
they have their heart in it. I think the Good Dot folks, they feed community dogs every day.
Wow.
I think the founders personally do it.
How nice.
And they go around in where their factory is located. They do that, and I was like, that is so inspiring.
Yeah.
And that's I think it's also very inspiring for them because you see who you're impacting.
Yes.
And often we're very separated from the people we're trying to solve problems for. But yeah, I mean, just some inspiring people that I look up to.
Both in the vegan and sustainable space, I've seen people who are so passionate about the cause, right? You care about the environment, you care about the planet, you care about the animals, but they're great activists. They're not that great of business people. I don't think the business comes first. I think the activism and the passion comes first, which is why I've also seen so many businesses fail. And I feel really bad because the heart is in the right place, right? They're doing it for the right reasons, but it doesn't really translate monetarily.
Yeah.
That's when you need to surround yourself with people who have the complementary skill sets that you
And
lack.
you can make a business out of it. Like
Yeah.
you necessarily don't need to have all the skills to build
Yeah,
a
you
business,
definitely
so-
can't. It's not even humanly possible for you to have the business acumen, the product,
And the
R&D,
passion
and the
Sure.
passion,
love
and
and
be
Sure.
perfect all the
Yeah.
time. So I think it takes a village, really like surround yourself with
100%.
people who are way smarter than you. Definitely all of my team, I think they have all of the skills that I will never have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, shout out to our teams because none of us can do it without them.
Oh,
Yeah.
100% takes a village, as you said. I'm very against the word self-made
Yeah.
because it takes so many people, even on a
100%.
day-to-day basis, to make who you are and what we do and what
Yeah.
we put out. So definitely a collective effort.
I love that. Yeah.
Do you shy away from using the word vegan or sustainable? Just the
Shy away where?
reputation. Do you shy away from like branding or marketing or calling your product vegan or sustainable? Because I know you went through a name change from Vegan Arc to what it is today, from OneGood to Nourish You. And do you, when someone said that, why are you making it about sustainability? Why are you calling it an impact product? Do you see the word sustainable or vegan as a marketing advantage or a disadvantage? Is it almost like, oh, it's vegan and sustainable, it's not going to be good, I don't want to buy it? Do you sell the product for the merit or do you sell it for the sustainability?
I don't do it front
vegan?
of the pack.
Okay.
I do it back of the pack. Because again, like I mentioned, if it's coming, then it's brownie points for the consumer.
Right.
But he does not, consumers don't want a sustainable product. Or sustainable, the word sustainable on the front of pack is not good enough for them to, make that purchase. So if they do see the back of pack and if they see that, okay, our packaging is not plastic, they say, oh wow, okay, I did do something good for the planet today. But we did a calls we did calls with about 500 consumers, and we realized that okay, sustainability is probably third or fourth on their priority list when they purchase good gum.
What is number one?
Taste.
Health, better for you.
Okay.
That's all. Yeah.
Hmm.
We are a very reactive community more than a proactive community. Once people will talk about segregating waste after waste. Waste has become such a big problem. But when told initially, people would not want to avidly segregate waste either, right? So like he mentioned, if you could put like VR headsets and show people what a landfill really looks like, then probably people will have like that alarming effect and then want to do something proactively about the waste. So we don't do anything front to pack. We do mention like the plastic free because the chewing gums are plastic free, but not the sustainable and vegan word.
Okay, interesting. What about you two?
I think I have to up the business angle in investor pitches, and that will take center stage, because they want to know really, what is this addressable market here? What is our repeat rate? Is there stickiness with consumers? And things like that. So I have to like obviously up the financial angle of the viability of Bare, and then the sustainability is very much inbuilt because that's who I am. So comes out. But I do have an impact slide right at the end to be like, this is what's happening in terms of what we're doing. Summarizing our annual impact report, and we recently got B Corp certified.
Congratulations, the first
that's
Indian
awesome.
company.
Thank you so much. So that, that's like the second slide on my deck. So,
That's like a subtle flex.
no, but I mean, so it's always like I have to be careful, like who I'm talking to in terms of on the investor pitches. Like, when there's an impact investor, I know they'll like hear me out more on the impact angle. But if I'm speaking largely to a very strategic financial investor, I know that finances have to come first, and then the rest will come right after.
You modulate your pitch as per who you're
Who
pitching,
you're pitching to.
Yeah.
I struggle with it. I mean, I know a lot of research suggests plant-based is better, and vegan should probably take second priority. Our social media certainly says vegan all the time, and our packaging also does say vegan. I think vegan is a good descriptor word, right? You must call a tree, and it's not necessarily your problem if somebody else associates tree with something else, like I don't know, a software tree, for example. But I think it's a great descriptive term. It's a beautiful word, and certainly the community space is a big part of it. And I will say, when Nourishu we were talking to Nourishu about acquiring OneGood, and they did acquire OneGood, and it's been a really nice journey since as well. Part of what
His watch says it all, guys. He got a huge ass watch after he got acquired.
Part of what was center stage in these discussions sometimes was how much we were in touch with the community and how much specifically the vegan community, and we've retained the word vegan. I think one of the things we spoke about was, should it be one brand? Should we retain OneGood as an independent identity? And the ultimate decision at that point was to keep OneGood as a separate brand because we spoke so much to vegans. I think it's and sometimes your startup is an extension of who you are, right? And I'm very much a vegan myself. So and sometimes you make that call yourself, regardless of what the data says sometimes. So I like the word vegan. We use the word vegan a lot on social media, and it's paid off in many ways. I mean, maybe not tangible all the time, but we have more engagement than any other plant-based or vegan brand on social media. Like there are entire media companies that we have more engagement than. Granted, these days there's a lot of hate comments, but some of them are funny.
Any marketing is good marketing.
And honestly, some of the hate comments are funny. So it's not all bad. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we've never shied away from talking about animal rights. At one point, our milk pack, and I think it's still there, spoke about animal liberation. We used the word there. Wow. And I thought, why not? We have the resources, we have this packaging space. It's the side of the pack. I mean, what else are you going to... Everybody says the same thing. It's sustainable, it's good for you, it's better for you. And that's important, right? Because that's a consumer benefit. And let it be on the front of the pack. On the side of the pack, exactly. It's real estate. Use it to talk about animal rights. And you have the choice to do it. If people didn't want it, fire me as CEO. Right? But the cool thing is, a lot of our investors, certainly in our earlier rounds, were all vegan. Huh? So they... Wow. And we I think everybody recognized in that moment that we have this interesting opportunity to really make our statement out there. Startup success is not guaranteed, but if given enough resources, right, you can reach enough people and so on. And we thought, why not conflate the two? And certainly maybe OneGood has set some benchmarks on what's possible to do with the word vegan, even if that's not a lesson you necessarily want to take for your own brand. And I certainly think there's merits to not doing it as well. It's deeply a personal choice, but as long as I'm involved, I'll want to call it vegan. And if it's not the best decision, it is what it is.
As long as it serves the purpose that you're trying to serve, because a lot of people shy away from the word vegan or plant-based or sustainable, whatever that might be, because people have these misconceptions that it may not taste as good. My niece is 4 years old, and when I tell her, that's vegan, I don't have that vegan product, I'm like, you're 4 years old, how do you have these misconceptions already that vegan is bad? And she's sitting and eting that Oreo, and I'm like, that's vegan, and she'll just put it down. She's eating it and it's vegan. Biscoff, that's vegan. And she's like, okay, I'm not having it anymore. Dal chawal, like, what are you going to do? Everything is vegan.
Yeah, people like, I don't like vegan products. I'm like, have you not had an apple before?
No, that's what I mean. I do want to talk about investments, fundraising, bootstrapping,
personal
finance, your journeys, personal finance as well, but also the business finance. How did each of you go about the fundraising journey? Did you decide it was better for you to bootstrap the company, or when did you decide was the right time to reach out to an investor? Were investors skeptical of what you were each trying to do, because it is a small niche?
Yeah.
What were those journeys like?
So I think, again, it's about being in the right place at the right time a lot. So our first round was from an animal rights activist who messaged me on Facebook. And by that time, so I was just sort of, I was going through engineering college, which I subsequently dropped out of. But at that point, I'd been talking to investors and like honestly terrible terms. They're like, someone once said, I'll give you 1 crore for 30% of the company. And the next day they're like, no, my CA said, let's make it 50 lakh instead. You still give me 30%. And then one day they're like, let's start with 10 lakh, 40 lakh is a loan. And I'm like, this is my first time raising, and I'm not from a business family at all. So I'm like, anything is lucrative. You just need to get funded. But we were bootstrapped until then. My father gave us the initial seed capital of 30,000 rupees. And that's kind of how we started. Me and my mom, yeah, and we did it from home, and that's when I was doing all the deliveries and stuff. So we only kind of were able to afford moving out of our kitchen after we got funded. But the first raise, it was probably entirely luck, maybe 90% luck, in the sense that Steve, who was our first investor, he invested in us because I was an activist.
Wow.
And because I had this track record, and he had never invested in an Indian company. There's a good chance I could run away with it, right? And
Yeah.
like, I don't know, you'll find me in the Seychelles at some point and like chilling with the money. So there's a real risk of that, but I think a lot of the trust came from the fact that there was activism there, and it was years of activism, like 4 or 5 years of like really every Saturday, Sunday, going, wherever possible, marches, protests, leafleting, speaking in schools, colleges, speaking inside McDonald's, whatever, what have you, right? All of it, the whole gamut. So I think that was from the community side, and then everything else was more of a hey, how's the business doing? And there's a lot of people that saw me speaking at an event, or like a lot of people frequent events to get deal flow, right? And there was that. Certainly met a mutual friend, Sid, through another friend, Chirag, who I think we'd met at an event or something like that. So a lot of it came from the community, be it through events and so on. And then I would say your first round is definitely a bet on the entrepreneur, but maybe even our second round was, because we're so early at that point. There's no way you can justify any valuation when you're that early. So it is a bet on your integrity, and I think your track record and so on. I certainly didn't have an entrepreneurial track record, but an activism track record. And then our last round, which was $1 million that we did, that was maybe more based on numbers. But I must also add, it was during the zero interest rate era, so valuations were generous. Money came in a lot more easier, and certainly there was a frenzy to get in on our cap table during when we raised on Angel List.
Talk of the town, no?
Yeah, it was. I think the investor who kind of anchored that Angel List round said it was the fastest filling up of any round that they've seen.
Wow.
Exactly a year later, it was so hard to raise capital. So I think market timing was great. And I think what happened for plant-based companies was that when Beyond Meat went underwater on their IPO price, the rug was pulled out from most companies. Companies that had term sheets got it all cancelled the next day. So it is maybe in hindsight kind of a sad thing that the space was so dependent on investors, but it's also maybe a little bit on the investors who decided to look at a food company and then evaluate it as a software company. And I must say, I think to Nourishu's credit, they were so gentlemanly about it. They were so nice about it, and I think I'm very grateful that they did. And they have a lot of muscle, right? I mean, when you have such a large distribution, such a fast growing business, I think that's maybe a good place for plant-based companies to be housed in today, because you do need distribution, you do need working capital, and sometimes it's maybe today this is maybe the rule rather than the exception, that you must be part of a larger company that has a lot of success and a lot of competence, and they can bring that to you, bring that distribution to you, bring that working capital, bring that muscle that you need. And as long as they have a patient outlook, I think prediction it'll work out. Of course, the future is uncertain for everybody, but that's sort of maybe in a nutshell how it went for us. Yeah.
Both of your journeys
Mm-hmm.
with
You wanna go
bootstrapping,
first?
funding, investment, all of it.
In our case, I mean, the same. We started with a small bootstrap check, 6 lakhs from my father. We started making the gums at home, in the kitchen. Started off in a 1 BHK first, and then 2 people, me rolling the gums, and then a couple of them packing and dispatching. We slowly grew. We never had the mindset of really raising money from day one. Wanted to grow, show some traction, because like Abhay mentioned, I think when we came into business, it was a lot more about how profitable you could be. It was not just about the numbers. You were not allowed to burn a lot more. So we wanted to grow it a little bit more profitably. And whenever I was asked, "Are you raising funds?" I said, "Yes, I am," because you don't know when you come across an investor, right? So. And that's one of these thoughts that go around which say that okay, you should take the funds when you don't need them the most, because when you need them the most you'll not find those funds, right? And then for easily about a year and a half we were looking to raise funds, and we came across a lot of VCs who were interested, but when they look at a niche market, when they see the market size is very small, they say okay, we just want to sit on the fence and kind of look at how you grow this, because nobody's done this before. They want to see some track record, because if it was any beverage, if it was any alco beverage, if it was anything else, they have a lot more brands around there, so they can place their valuations on kind of revenue multiples and all of that. But in a chewing gum space, nobody's done that before, and a chewing gum that does not taste as good, does not feel as good. So a little skeptic, but they say okay, there is an exciting opportunity. So the large brands like the Fireside Ventures or everybody in the FMCG space, right? The large names like a Huddle, Fireside, all of these people still take our MISs. They still want to look at our sheets with like magnifying glasses, but they still don't want to invest. So we also we took a different approach. We then got incubated by NSR Cell at IIM Bangalore at their circular economy cohort, and we happened to land a grant of 15 lakh rupees from Pernod Ricard India Foundation. So this is again one of these thoughts to all the people who are watching, that the original VC route is not the only way. There are a lot more alternative sources of funding that are available, particularly in the food space now, apart from the grant, because that is no questions asked, 15 lakhs straight into your account. You do what you want to with that. And there's a lot more opportunities from the government, right? Like I could easily get a 50% rebate on my manufacturing capacity if I wish to put my own. So there's so much funds available, but people still want to take that fancy VC route because it brings them their
Valuation.
your story article, and they bring them probably on the Financial Times, etc., etc. But all that just looks rosy because you don't want a lot of people telling you what you should be doing. So we I took my own time to kind of figure what sort of investors would make sense, because in my first job I did see a very bad investor founder relationship, and I saw how the company fell apart. So I thought okay, because it felt like I burnt my hands there. I mean, I was that invested in the company, so I knew the right kind of investor is also very important. So uh, and then we went into Shark Tank, and that was like our way of saying that yes, guys, we have arrived, and we problems in the niche market also need to be solved. Like just because it's niche doesn't mean it should be ignored, right? So and that kind of opened doors for us with a lot more boutique investors, right? There are smaller investors who are looking for smaller industries, and with Shark Tank, with getting four sharks giving us a check, that gave a lot more credibility. And all the guys who were sitting on the fence before we went on to Shark Tank then wanted to talk to us, and then we acted kind of pricey, and well, not obviously pricey, but uh, but yeah, I mean, we found the right set of investors, and we're like just about very close to signing those documents and getting those funds in. And these are people, you just don't need the money, you need money along with a lot more connects, etc., that they can bring in. So we've got a good set of 5 angels that we feel would be super helpful at the start of this journey, and then we can scale it to some point where these larger VCs. So yeah, for us it was the alternate sources of funding, and I think I'll still take those grants and every opportunity
Yeah,
that
for
comes
sure.
away. Any free money is good money.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Starting out, definitely.
I love what you said about not every company has to be a billion-dollar company.
Yeah,
Niche
yeah.
markets have value,
Yeah.
and I love what you said about
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I went to school in California. So, Shark Tank was recorded very close to where
Oh,
my
wow.
university is. And like the whole Silicon Valley proximity, things that my friends were doing from Cambridge, raising funds was super easy. That my peers were, when they were starting off and all of that. So when you are young, you're quite naive. And for whatever reason, you feel like you work hard, you get a scholarship, you do this. It's been very straightforward, your path, at least for me up till that point. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to do a kick-ass pitch. I'm going to have a beautiful slide. I'm going to talk about environment. I'm going to work out like it does for everyone else. And I faced so many rejections, and I was doing this pitching and stuff on the side. I had a full-time job at Selco that I loved. And this was my weekend hustle. I would do pop-ups on weekends. I was servicing white labeling orders for one of the first organic stores in Bangalore. So I was just like, the hustle was dull. I was doing pitches early, late, or like all of that. And then I was like, this is not working. I had racked up more than like 200 rejections, I think, at that point. And I said, screw it. I'm just going to put my head down and build.
Yeah.
And that's when I started building. We started quite early with our social media. It was just me on my phone, literally loading up the car with inventory to take to the bulk orders and like all of this stuff. So it grew very organically. I did my first website of Shopify, which we still have. I just watched videos how to program and like figured it. And, so all of that happened slowly, very organically. And then someone reached out on LinkedIn, actually, an investor, and he said, I would love to chat. Do you want to hang out we could just get a coffee and discuss a little bit more. And he was so kind and warm, and there was so much like value synergy there, but also strategic synergy because he comes from the FMCG space in manufacturing, and he has a 30-year-old family legacy kind of business. So I was like, that's great. So that actually restarted my interest in fundraising, because until then I said I'm not going to talk to any other investors. I had just stopped entertaining anything, and I was just building, and that's when people started noticing us, and then people were like, oh, do you want to have a call? And then there was an event at the Axel office, and Social Alpha and Axel were just like doing a little like scoping of like circular economy. It was in 2018. And I went and I talked about Bare Necessities and all of that. And just right there and there with Prashant and Manoj, he was like, are you raising? Do you want to check? And that's kind of how I raised my first seed round.
Don't make it sound that simple.
I'm so grateful. I'm really so grateful.
It's very rare.
No, it was, and I wasn't even looking. It was a workshop.
It comes exactly. It comes when you don't need it.
It was like a scoping of the thing. It was just like a conversation around circular economy and like, what's going on in the space. It was not a pitch competition or anything. So I was just like dumbfounded. But I would just say like one thing that is so common is that each of my angels have such high integrity and value alignment with what we are building. Care about sustainability, care about good products with high integrity of ingredients, that are non-polluting to your skin, but also the groundwater. I mean, very holistic, and just like really understand what I'm trying to do. And I like really honestly have lots of love and respect for them. So that's kind of how our seed round happened. And then, they've been generous, our same angels, to kind of reinvest at for follow-on investment, etc. And then now recently I had a very serendipitous kind of meeting with someone, and it was at Go Native, which is like a largely it's
we
vegan.
sell at Go
It's a
Native
vegan
as well.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fully vegan.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a plant
It's a
forward
restaurant.
cafe.
It's a chain of restaurants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I met someone. She's like, "Oh my god! Like, my daughter's been reaching out to you on LinkedIn. Like, are you Sahar?" And I was like, "Yeah, hi." And it is this amazing, beautiful family that I love, and their daughter's kind of like this Greta Thunberg of the UAE. And so they, as a family, they just kind of joined now. So it was really. So I think. With everyone, I just it's not that I'm like talking to them daily or whatever, but they're always there, and I think I just love and respect that they were supporting this when more of the traditional mainstream investors wanted to sit out, they wanted to sit in. So
it's very mission aligned investors for you as well.
I think I have a good line here. Like instead of having FOMO, you create FOMO. Like that's exactly how. Like I didn't get funds. I started building.
Yeah.
And then the investors had the FOMO. And
Listening to Sahar just makes me feel so warm and happy.
Yeah. And it feels like I've followed the whole journey on Instagram. I mean,
because we're quite
it's
real.
weird. It's
We're
weird
quite
how we've
real.
met or spoken for the first time, but
Yeah.
I know this for the last 5 years, and I think that's I usually just go and follow all these early brands, and I feel like
And also we're each other's
seeing this.
support systems. You look at each
Yeah.
other,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the
You need that
ecosystem needs all of
community.
us.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I was just saying, massive respect
Oh.
to you. I was very moved by what you said about the bootstrapping stuff. I think it's takes so much courage,
God,
and
yeah.
just a lot of respect. Yeah.
So kind.
What advice would you give to so many founders, entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs in this space that want to create a vegan or a sustainable or an impact-driven business that have the financial aspect in their heads? How do they go about the whole fundraising journey, bootstrapping, going after VC? Any solid advice, knowing what you know now, of how you'd go about funding?
I think I'd say if they start concentrating on profitability from day one, not like atrocious amounts of profit, but even just enough to sustain and reinvest in your business, because the funding in the impact space is very limited, right? There are very limited players giving out limited amount of funds, and like I mentioned in the initial part of the podcast, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. If you're in there for a long run, if you're passionate about that problem, you will stumble upon the right people at the right time, right? You just have to do what you're doing. And there's a market for everything. So, for everybody wanting to build, just don't want to build, do it, right? Like a lot of people just fail in their minds.
Yeah.
They say, okay, I should have done it, I could have done it, but like if you don't start executing on ground, you'll never know. So I have a lot more respect for people who've started and failed than people who've didn't never started at all, right? So yes, so two things. One is just concentrate on profitability, because that will be your source of funding until the real funds do come in, and that it's a long game. So those two points in.
I would say that women kind of try and shy away from the economics of it all, and will say like, oh, I'll dive into the product or I'll dive into the branding. But I would say I think we need more women to become more financially confident and savvy. So I
Yeah.
would say start small, even if it's a basic Excel, but like get super confident with your numbers.
Yeah.
And it's taken me some time to do that, but they will also, people who you're speaking to will respect you as a female founder if you actually know what's going on in your business on the number front. So I would say it's a process of learning, so commit to that process of learning. And even if that means starting off with a super simple Excel that you understand, but really be very independent about your finances. I would say that's one advice I would say, to start off with, and leverage grants. I mean, we got a Cartier grant, so all of these things really help, which is like 40,000 euros, and there's lots of
Wonderful money.
generous
Wow.
capital
Mayank
out
was like,
there.
"That was out. This is
No,
up."
I think it's only
female
women.
founders.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So this was more from a female founder perspective, and even if you aren't eligible in their criteria or whatever, but look at the Cartier Impact Initiative. There are lots of resources. Read their newsletters. Leverage resources and upskill yourself. I've taken a lot of accelerators to just really understand the financial aspect of my business. And yeah, start early and do that from day one.
Start early, examples right now.
16. Actually, 16.
Great advice from the both of you. I think not a lot to add there from an operational lens. I think it's still a choice to go the VC route, right? And the choice is available and it exists. I think if you have a real feel for the opportunity, I think, and if you've raised any VC check at all, then maybe the choice is made for you. But if you before that, if you haven't and you have a real feel for the opportunity, I think it does make sense to get a lot of leverage into the system as much as possible, right? And if you get a slingshot at the moon, I think I think there's merit to taking it. A lot of there's a lot of glamorization about indie hacking, and it's a great way to indie hacking, bootstrapping, and so on. It's a great way to build a business. I also think we shouldn't disparage the VC space because of the binary outcomes. The nature of it is a binary outcome, right? They force you to get to an eventual outcome, be it failure or success. But some of the world's best companies we know of have raised venture capital, and I think it remains valuable. And it's caveating this out, if I ever start a company one day, I might not raise VC. I'm like, oh my god, it is a lot of stress, right? So even though it may not be a choice I would make, I would still recommend who is looking at a big like what they feel is a really big opportunity to try and shoot for it. I think even taking my own experiences after OneGood and now at Nourish You, I mean, the kind of people they have, you simply cannot afford as a bootstrapped entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And the kind of access that those people bring, the kind of someone interesting told me this thing. If you have a 0 to 1 journey, a 1 to 10 journey, and a 10 to 100 journey, and maybe 10 to 100 is more like, and maybe beyond 100 is like you work at Mondelez or whatever, and 1 to 10 is maybe more a series A to series C, and like 10 to 100 is maybe where Wingreens and Viba is right now. So there's stages in the company. At 0 to 1 and 1 to 10, you learn a lot of what not to do, but beyond that, you learn what to do, and there's a distinction there, and it's a valuable distinction because what to do is a lot more valuable than knowing what not to do. Because what not to do, there's 1,000 things, but there's only a few what to do. Yes, that's why failure is not always wonderful, right? Because it may not give you those lessons. So, and I've learned so much in this last 1 year, and it is primarily from having that kind of access, that leverage, those people who have been on 10 to 100 journeys, 100 plus journeys, and it is a joy to sort of be in that ecosystem. I think I've matured as an entrepreneur a lot after the acquisition, which is a sad thing to say, because I wish I knew all this before the acquisition or before even fundraising, because maybe we would have been Series A, Series B, Series C. I don't know, right? I mean, all these possibilities exist, but I think if you load enough into the spring and you're able to release it at the right time and the right place, I think going that distance is a very valuable life journey. But also, you end up creating a few thousand jobs in the process, and I think that's valuable.
That's what helps you sleep at night. I mean, more than the money that comes into your account.
Yeah, so there's two ways to go, and I think even though from a stress perspective, from a a resource constraint perspective, bootstrapped is clearly an awesome way to go. I think should you really have that chance, try VC and see what happens. I mean, there is the accelerated path to failure, but that is what comes with pulling the string very, very far back, the spring very, very far back. That's one thing that I think is so an interesting thing to consider.
In that 26-year-old brain.
Wow, we're going after age now. Clearly.
But I've not lost my hair, so paisa might not come.
Shots fired.
Oh, no.
Touche. I'm not stepping into this. I'm not taking any
But I think
sides
another thing I want to add here is, like, got to be shameless in this space, right? Go out and try to win that bread. When we went on to Shark Tank, I didn't have an idea of how to put a valuation to the company, right? We were doing 8 lakh a month on revenue, and my ask was 10 crores. 10 crores as valuation. That is about 10x revenue multiple. And if you actually see the Shark Tank episodes, Namita Thapar usually says like, "Oh, that's a very high revenue multiple that you're asking for." But I think what kind of overpowered that was the truth, the honesty, and the passion that the two brothers, me and Bhuvan, had on screen, and that didn't let any of these sharks think about the ask as much, right? And that is the kind of punt that they can take on the entrepreneur's passion. So if you're shameless, if you're passionate enough to pitch, like even you raised funds at a random showcase, not even at a pitch, right? So I think if you're shameless and if you're passionate enough to showcase that problem to the person at the right time, you'll get those funds.
I must say something about Mayank's work ethic. There are a lot of startup events I frequent. They always have a stall there, huh? And they're always there. I think you've personally, I've met you a couple of times in these events, and it's actually very tiring to be at an event, stand on your feet all day. And for you to have done that for so long, I think
that creates a lot more consumer founder connect more than the brand. I think people connect with the person who's building it more, right? So I think exactly. So to be honest, like, we got our investor now because of Namu Recommends. There's this cricketer Mayank Agarwal who came to the stall 4 years ago. Not 4 years, probably the first year when we started. That's 3 years ago. He came to the stall. He was all masked up, but I could identify because I'm like a super avid cricket fan. And my brother went and pulled him. He's like, "You have to come to the stall." He came. He tried the gums, and he said, "Okay, I mean, I'm not a big chewing gum person," but we gave him some gums. And then 2 years down the line, he reached out to us. He said, "Hey, are you still looking to raise funds?" And I mean, I think it's if I was not there on that day, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And this whole round is happening because of him. It's all the people around him. So I think just that.
Lot of
Two Mayanks on the
serendipities.
cap table now.
There's a good advertisement that's already in the mind that, okay, probably once he comes on board, we could make
Nice.
that commercial. So
Stealing your idea and just pretending
No,
as
no,
if
no.
he thought of it before. He's gonna go back and take that. He's like, yeah, I know, I had it before you said it. Sure. Serendipities aside, what is one thing you'd credit the success of your business to? Knowing so many players have come and gone in the impact space, in the sustainability space, in the plant-based space. What is the reason you think you've not just survived but thrived?
for me, it's the consumer. If the consumer didn't pick the product, if they didn't, pick the product again and again and again, we wouldn't be anywhere. So yes, that half your job is done by making the product, but
Yeah.
I think the consumer plays a larger part. So for us, it's more about educating consumers and then letting them make an educated choice, right? We don't ever push that, hey, buy good gum. We say, we just, our whole strategy is about educating them about sustainability or eating healthier or stuff like that. And overall empowering that consumer, and then they end up purchasing the product. So having to pick a product that does not taste that good, I'm saying it again and again because we can never kind of match the taste profile that a regular chewing gum has. So the consumer is making a compromise to pick a product that doesn't taste as well. It is expensive. So I feel the consumer has been a very big part of our success, and we're super kind of helpful for like those early adopters because they're like our cheerleaders. We've seen kids discuss good gum in school vans, right? So that's
Where are
where
you
it's-
stalking them? Are you like Alexa?
so these
listening
are
to
these
what
are these
kids
are friends, these are cousins, these are my nieces, friends of nieces, and then apartment kids. The day they knew we were on Shark Tank, they till date they come on the door at 9 o'clock. It's Halloween for them every day. Like, I need that good gum, else we're not stopping to ring that bell. So they're like our cheerleaders, and so yeah, consumers, we're super
It's a regular
grateful.
trick or treat for you.
Yeah.
All year round.
To follow up on that, I just want to ask, there's a lot of good products out there
Yeah.
that taste good,
Yeah.
that are well packaged,
Yeah.
well branded, that still don't perform and still go out of
Yeah.
business. So it's not really just the taste and
Yeah.
the packaging of it.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of good businesses
Yeah.
shut down,
Hmm.
especially over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
The whole winter in funding, and there being a steady decline in investors wanting to bet on impact, sustainable or plant-based businesses as well.
Yeah.
So is that the only factor?
See, look and feel of the product is one. One is again your positioning, how you're marketing, how approachable you are as a founder or as a team. Because if your product is there, if it looks nice, if a person doesn't have anybody to talk to, then probably the person buys it once and never buy it again. The repeat comes when the founder is out there, the company is very, very approachable. I'm grateful enough, like there are people who make it a point to come to these panel discussions in colleges, etc., saying, hey, I wanted to talk to you and that's why I'm here. So if you're out there, and it's not just your product, it's a amalgamation of both things, right? You're like the influencer for your own product. So it's a mix of both.
I think authenticity. We've been quite
Yeah.
real on our social
Yeah.
media, from like behind the scenes to all of that, but also putting up ourselves for review. B Corp took 2 years, and it's such a detailed due diligence on your governance, on your supplier chain. We have a supplier code of conduct with each of our vendor supplier has to sign.
Wow.
How much you pay each employee? Is it fair trade? Is it based on the standard?
Wow.
Putting ourselves up for review in those 6 categories by a third party, neutral third party, and kind of validating all of these claims that we are people, planet, profit. I think that was huge, and for us to get it, and you need 81 and over to get certified, and we got 100.
Wow.
Wow.
100 on 100.
My
no, it's
dad
not-
would be so proud of you with that one mark that I missed on my exam.
No,
But
this
you
is not
got that
100 on
100.
No,
This
it's
is
not
100 on-
100. It's not 100.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
you just
okay.
need an 81 and over to get certified. Yeah. So I think, and just our transparency, like we create an annual impact report. Our first page says we're not perfect. We don't know if we're doing this correctly. This is our attempt, best at calculating our impact, and we're doing so with this method. So everything comes with like realness and says, you know what, we're doing our best. It's also like a self-evaluation tool for us, this impact report, because we want to know if we're actually doing what we sought, like set out this business to do in the first place. So I think that's been really important, to just like stay humble, be up for review, be authentic to who you are, wear it on your sleeve, the good, bad, the ugly. When I don't know, packaging might leak, when we have a sachet that's has a tree resin on the inside, and sometimes it leaks with if it's in a very humid area, XYZ.
Same problem that we
yeah,
discussed, no?
right, exactly. And so we're saying, sorry, and we're imperfect, but we're trying our very best, and it's all about incremental changes to get better. So I think that honesty has helped us a bit.
Got a zero waste.
And
so
she's the
perfect.
face of a business, like she's talking about all the problems they face. And that's really now, when you see our Instagram, I'm there talking, saying, hey, our flavors don't last as long. And here's why. And we are proud about it, right? So that creates a connect more than
He's
creating
stealing
like
all your
an
strategies, guys.
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
It's all of us. It's okay.
My job's hard, huh? These people give great answers and I have to like follow up with something
That's why
original.
you go first. I'll let you go first.
I love what you said about authenticity. I think we've been looping customers into our pricing strategies and stuff on social media. Like when we had to like virtually double the price of our curd overnight because we were running out of money and we had to shore up ways to get more revenue. We spoke about it quite transparently, and I think it's important to be authentic, not only because it helps build trust, but also your customer gets an insight into the business.
Yeah.
And I think they're more likely to invest emotionally in it. What I've also realized is there's all those things that make a lot of sense from an authenticity, from an impact, sustainability perspective, is great for business as well. It's almost like a counterintuitive lesson. People think you have to like destroy the planet and then make money. But no, actually, you can do something really opposite. And as long as you do it well, you'll make potentially more money. And that's maybe with the first wave or second wave of startups that are attempting this, there'll be the 10th wave and they'll probably get all the success, all the large outcomes, because the first players always take the most pain. Maybe the other thing that we did, the one thing that maybe give ourselves credit for is that we did take quite a lot of risk, not a lot of unreasonable risk, I would say. When we acquired 3 vegan companies, and we put it out there, and what is a small company doing, like acquiring other brands, like putting press releases and like putting press releases about fundraise, talking big things like Dairy Without Animals. I think it's important for people to see your vision and to really execute authentically on that vision. I think if it doesn't go all the way through, it's maybe part of it is definitely the lack of resources, right? I think and maybe your second at bat or your third at bat, you'll have more resources at play. But it's important to give it a genuine real shot at it and not shy away from sort of doing the things that may get you there. I think the 3 acquisitions that we did, I thought were very outlandish, but I was so in love with the process of the deal making. There were gaps in our product line and some of our products sucked, and these new products were like virtually an improvement overnight, and we got new team members as a result of this, a lot of which played out very well over time. Some of it didn't, right? But I think like I was so in love with that process of deal making, the journey itself, the idea of like pulling that spring as far back as possible. That was my job. Once you raise VC, that's your job, right? You can't then go back and say, hey, I'm going to take 10 years to like incrementally flesh out revenue, because then like, why do you raise that much capital? Raise a smaller amount and then do it, right? So you don't always know these answers before you raise it, of course, sometimes. So certainly I was, when I raised my first round, I was 21 maybe. Yeah. So certainly a lot of naivety, a lot of being very green at it, pun not intended. But yeah, it's this, I think taking as much risk as possible, as reasonably possible. I think people shy away from risk because they want longevity, but sometimes really taking that risk, even if it reduces your longevity, can catapult you. I think like startups are like a step function, right? So you kind of stabilize at this point, and then there's an inflection point where you go here, and then you stabilize at this point. It's a step function. And what is this thing that gets you there? It's not always an easy answer, and it may not always be incremental. I think for us, for example, like one step function that turned out to not be one was we launched plant-based meat, and immediately our revenues went up like this. It didn't quite last. It went back down though after a while because we didn't have a differentiated product and many other things.
Oversaturated market as well.
Yeah, and a lot of people who did it better than us, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think that seeing that inflection point come through, at least at that point, had we been able to sustain it, was very interesting. And we've had several inflection points, one of which was to go all in on D2C during the pandemic, which was very counterintuitive perhaps, but we were considered, we got the essential service sort of thing, and we continued to deliver, and that's when we grew 4-5x, and we never saw that kind of growth after the pandemic. Just we took as much reasonable risk as possible.
Very cool. I want to talk about affordability and accessibility really quickly, because I know we've got the curd here. But just talking about the milk, correct me if I'm wrong, normal dairy milk costs anywhere between like 65 to 90 rupees a litre.
Yeah.
And plant-based milks on average are about 250, 260 rupees. Where is good milk at with the pricing, and how do you make it competitive, and how does the common person in India afford that? How do we get to the middle class?
That's a great question. I think if you copy paste the dairy industry, you will inherit the same problems. The challenge is they have scale, you don't. So you run into worse problems than they have. For example, I think one thing we've tried and we've not been able to scale it so far, or maybe for a whole lot of reasons, we have not scaled it, right? So in Indranagar, actually, where we are shooting this podcast right now, you can get plant-based milk from us at 60 rupees a litre, 59 rupees a litre. It's 1 rupee cheaper than Amul.
Wow.
And I think we've been able to do it fairly well, and it's very zero waste. We bring it in a bottle and we pour it in your vessel. We take the bottle back, right? Hard to scale, but certainly what we maybe proved to ourselves was that it's possible to do it, and it's not that much of an operational load, honestly. And the dairy industry has done a good job at this in the yesteryears, where they used to bring milk to your doorstep and then sort of pour it in your vessels and so on, or you could go to a vending machine and then just get liquid milk. So all these things existed. I think this because of convenience, and because there's another problem that is unique to the plant-based industry, there's not a lot of consumer density. So you have one customer from Gorakhpur, you have one customer from Pondicherry, you have one, like maybe 10 customers from Bangalore, and it is in your interest to service all of them. So what do? You put it in a Tetra Pak. And what is in a Tetra Pak? 90% water. Because plant-based milk is not 100% cashews, 100% soya, right? It's a blend of dry ingredients in water. So you're really spending so much money to stabilize a water-based solution, and you're paying so much shipping for water. And the whole thing is a result of this water being stabilized in a Tetra Pak. And Tetra Paks are notoriously unrecyclable. Like, no matter how much greenwashing you do, and I'm very guilty of this, our company uses Tetra Paks. It's not a great thing for the environment at all. And again, we must be transparent about where we're failing, right? And I don't know when there will be a viable shelf-stable alternative to beverages where you can still keep something shelf-stable. But in the absence of something, maybe Tetra is the best option. So that's why the prices are so high. In fact, if you just look at the raw material pricing, it's not that high. Like most plant-based milks in any factory is like 20-30 rupees to manufacture. That's actually the farm gate price of milk today. Because of the scale and other things, they're able to deliver at 50-60 rupees or so on. But it's not that plant-based milk is inherently more expensive. It is only more expensive because you put in a Tetra Pak and then you're only manufacturing maybe 10,000 liters at a time, where the dairy industry is giving you 3 lakh liters and making it. In fact, there are a lot of dairies with Tetra Pak facilities that will simply not give you the time of day because your 10,000 liters at a time is so small for them.
Correct.
So all things said and done, I still think there's an opportunity to innovate here. For example, a milk powder might do the job. But again, you have to trade off consumer convenience and things like that.
Also the
curd,
idea
for example.
of freshness, sorry to cut you off again.
Freshness, yeah.
People, when it comes in a ready milk form, people think it's fresh, even though it's just a blend of dry ingredients into water. So.
And we are a country that loves fresh, huh? Like, for all that we say about some products in our country having worse ingredients, I think the average household is actually intentionally trying to be more conscious about what they eat. It's a lot of emphasis on homemade food and things like that. So I think directionally, from a long time, we've been going towards clean label. So that's a nice thing. But to come back to affordability, so a curd, for example, is like 99 rupees for 450 grams.
How does that compare to the dairy curd?
I think it's like close to Akshay Kalpa, I think. And close to similar curd you'd find here. But we did explore an option of doing it in a pouch, and I think you drop the price a lot. To be honest, the curd is the same whether it's in a pouch or a cup, but the consumer perception is different. So, and the pouch is like 50 paisa, the tub is something like 7-8 rupees, right? So, and if you your gross margin is typically like a certain multiple on your cost price, because you're feeding many people across the supply chain. So if you're going through a retailer, they have to make a margin, and then the distributor has to make a margin, your stockist has to make a margin, and there's leakage across the supply chain where there's wastage and other things. So at the end of it, like, FMCG companies are like famously not as profitable at all. Like the net margins on some of even very well established brands are so low. Not to mention there's a credit period involved in all this. So your cost of financing is
30
very
to
high.
45 days.
Yeah.
And
What?
and that's on paper, huh? Some people pay you 180 days
Of
later.
course.
No,
Some
those are
people-
the large brands, like the
Yeah.
Reliances of the world, the food
Yeah,
halls and
no,
all
I
of
mean-
them. They're like super slow.
What I meant to say is, even though they agree to
Yeah.
45 days, they
Yeah.
pay you 60 days later.
Yeah.
They pay you 100 days
So,
later.
I mean, as small brands, you're kind of neglected.
Yeah.
To some
Yeah.
extent, they might delay your payments, but they will not delay a PepsiCo or
Right.
or any of the Britannias, because their supermarket aisles will be empty if they put an embargo on them. But with us, they can play around. So that's like a problem that
Yeah.
all of us
Yeah.
face.
Yeah, and also
And-
subsidies. Sorry,
Subsidies, yeah.
I was just going to say, because the dairy industry is heavily subsidized, and the plant-based industry, I don't think plant-based milk gets any subsidies at the
No.
moment. Correct me if I'm wrong.
18% GST.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's,
we-
by the way, 18% more expensive right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, 100%. I mean, I think if we were to do any kind of financial mechanism to help incentivize businesses like ours,
Reduce GST.
reduce GST 0, 5%.
Yeah.
I know when the first GST regime came in, my products had a 27 GST.
Oh my God.
And then there were revisions, thankfully, to now like a 12 and an 18. Largely, we're in the 18
We
bracket.
in fact discussed this with like a Niti Aayog person at IIM.
Yeah.
Told them, see, these guys re-script, they make paper,
yeah.
recycled paper. They make really good recycled paper, and then there's this bleached paper. Both of them go on the same GST. So what's the incentive for people to get into the business, and what's the incentive for consumers to adopt that product?
Exactly.
So even with chewing gums, we're on 18%, and it's the same sugary chewing gums and the artificial crap chewing gum. They're also at 18%. On the contrary, when you look at the US, there's like sugar taxes and all of those things
Yeah.
to kind of incentivize newer brands to bring in products that are lower sugar
Mm.
Yeah.
or healthier. So there has to be a parity that comes from the government. That's the only way I think all of us can become mainstream products and not remain a niche.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about, because I'm sure the regular chewing gum that you buy in a kirana store
Yeah.
is so much cheaper.
Yeah, it's just 1 rupee a gum, and that's sugar and then artificial colors. And then there's Orbit, which is like probably 50 rupees for 15 gums, and we are double of that. So we're 99 rupees for 15 chewing
15
gums.
chewing
So,
gums.
and that's 18 rupees straight up for GST,
Yeah.
right? So if my GST was slashed to 5%, I could easily just sell this at 90 rupees, and that 10%, 10 rupees, I could easily give that discount to a consumer, and that would make me reach out to more masses. So all of these problems will take some time, but I think
Yeah.
with more and more number of brands that come in, there'll be a lot more noise, and they will have to make these changes eventually.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think speaking pragmatically, I think this industry will be taken seriously as maybe
Yeah.
I say industry loosely, when there's enough jobs created. I think
Mm.
ultimately, why is dairy at 5% or 0%? Because of the number of jobs. It is expedient from a vote bank perspective to tax these things at a lower price. So there's some looking inward we have to do, right? For example, I know in many brands in the vegan space use artisanal as a code word to pay people lower amounts of money, and certainly not a comment on you, Mayank. Right? you're at a vastly different scale. There's so many artisanal plant-based cheese, and who's making it, and they're paid so low, and the product margin is so high. There is a lot of inward looking that we have to do. Are we paying our people well? Are we paying a living wage?
Yeah.
Are we? It's so important. And are we treating people as expendable? How are we doing in terms of, you said insurance,
Yeah.
and that's great. And a lot of brands don't offer that, right?
Mm.
And we must. There is a level of greenwashing that we accept. There is a level of virtue signaling that we do that does not that we might think we're above just because we're vegan or just because we're sustainable. And my intuition on this, and I certainly don't not claiming to have figured it out. I think the intuition is that once all these things fall into place, your price will be low. I think because there's yeah, there's enough scale there. There's enough. Maybe this is just fantasy, but who knows? It's maybe my wish into the universe. I often think like, what would Ambani do, right? And if an Ambani or whatever, one of those guys ever decided to enter the plant-based space, and they entered with an aggression mindset, and the desire needs to be there. I think the space
They
would
can
go
make
from
it.
150 crores to 1,500 crores.
100%.
Oh, in
overnight.
a day.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So what are they doing? They also have the same problem with pricing and procurement and everything. It's maybe that Jeff Bezos once said, your margin is my opportunity. So where somebody's doing a 60% gross margin, they would accept a 20%.
Correct.
And they would convert it to a 20% contribution margin later on
Yeah.
by sheer market dominance.
Getting customer loyalty initially and just like capitalizing on people to become to want it, right?
That's why there's so many acquisitions happening, right? Like
Yeah.
You grow it to a point, and then a big distribution house comes in and says,
Yeah.
okay, you're in 1,000 stores. I'll take you to 10,000 stores, and then you'll automatically be profitable in.
Will you
see.
sacrifice that for the ethics of your business? Or if there's a big company, say a big MNC or like a big conglomerate that's like, I'll buy over your company, but you don't get to run it anymore, and it's run with different values than what you started the company with. Would you be okay with that?
Absolutely not. If my chewing gum is plastic free, it remains plastic free because that's the ethic of the brand. But yeah, if there are any other things that have to be changed, say probably make it a little bit more affordable. Instead of using xylitol and stevia, use sugar to make it a little bit more affordable. Yes, but like if that one major ethic is not followed, because my consumers, my early adopters know me for that plastic-free biodegradable
Yeah.
chewing gum. And if I start doing that, I mean, even though even if it is super lucrative, I don't think he'll ever,
Come back.
sell any cow's
Yeah.
milk
No.
thing as a.
Is this rolling?
Yeah, it was rolling.
Okay,
No,
because
no,
that was a
but
great answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great question. we should attempt to answer it. No? Shall we do it?
Yeah, you
Okay,
can.
okay.
You absolutely
Um,
can, because founders faces that you get a great valuation and someone's offering you a lot of money, but it's not going to be run with the same ethics and values.
Yeah. So honestly, if this is a tough one for sure, but if it means like my products are going to be accessible to 10,000 odd people, distribution units, like if my product's going to be accessible to everyone, and thereby making it easier and more accessible for more people to live a more low waste lifestyle, I will collaborate with someone who I right now might think like, oh my gosh, that person's the devil, right? And maybe, but I want all of my values in terms of the products, its packaging and its zero waste philosophy, and its integrity of ingredients to be intact. But I don't mind collaborating with in the larger goal that more people will be impacted and there will be less plastic in our oceans and landfills.
I would do it. So in the sense that Mayank said it best. He said there are values you can accept changing, and there are values you should not accept changing. And vegan is one of them. I think because I'm so into animal protection, that's like my life's mission. Like I will accept most other things. And it's not actually that a brand that has paid 500 crores for your business will change the very things that made you worth 500 crores overnight, right? So I will say actually with Nourishu, the synergy was greatly there, simply because they were so farmer friendly. They're such a strong supply chain roots, and generally they valued veganism. They in fact Nourishu themselves turned vegan as a brand. So this was even before they'd met us, and many other things, right? But there's like give any name, I would absolutely do it. There's the other thing, right? With a large outcome makes you wealthy or investors wealthy, great for the ecosystem. And importantly, you can be an investor now, or you can acquire other companies as well.
Oh yeah, I would love to.
Yeah.
I can't wait to be a woman with paychecks. With with
You're
checks
doing a
for-
good job. Here's a check.
I just want to like literally
Yeah.
support so many
Yeah.
amazing people.
Be a
doing so
cheerleader
great
for
stuff.
them.
Yeah.
And in fact, the number one thing I would wish upon every founder in this space is not that their company does this or does that or has this kind of thing. It's that everybody becomes wealthy.
Yeah.
I think it is, we live in a system today where money buys influence, right? You can buy shareholding in a company, you can
Yeah.
sit on their board. And if you have enough money, you can sit in a large enough company.
Yeah.
And so, and it scales so much. Like you can sit on the board of Tesla if you have enough shares of Tesla, whatever, right? And name
run
any
the
company. Yeah, just any company. We have this mechanism where money is a voting machine, and if you have enough of it, you can tangibly change the system around you. So wealth is one thing I'll wish upon everybody in this room, in this space. anybody who I consider an ally.
Yeah. You look at my bank account every time, like I'd get my salary, I'd look at what I was spending money on, and it was just vegan products. And like, that says so much about who I am.
It's like you're investing,
As a
early stage
person.
investing
Yeah,
into their
for sure.
businesses.
It was just
Voting with your
buying
wallet.
vegan.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. Like,
Yeah.
what would I do if I had more money? I'd buy more vegan products. That's actually what I'd do.
Yeah.
It would be that one expensive, sustainable metal razor, it'd be
It's a
that
one-time buy.
one-off
Yeah.
thing here and there. But we discussed all other products. I do want to talk about the
Yeah,
bamboo
for sure.
toothbrush, because this is also, you get a normal toothbrush, I think at 20-30 rupees. And you would buy a bamboo toothbrush for twice or thrice that
150.
amount, 150.
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
maneuver that?
So just like a few things about our products. So they're color coded at the end. So even if you are a 4-year-old, like the one with the blue tip is yours, for example. And then we have distinct icons on all 4 of them. So they're braille enabled. So in case you are visually impaired, you can identify which one is yours by putting your finger on the little icons. And then bamboo is one of the fastest growing plants in the world. So this is again a great kind of alternative to plastic that's going to land up in our oceans, landfills, be here for 900 years, actually never ever disintegrate fully, just land up kind of coming back in microplastics in our food, our supply chain, all of that. So the environmental externalities of this is where I cost 150 rupees, which means cleaner air, cleaner soils, and less microplastics.
The microplastic thing is really scary.
Yeah, 80%. Sorry.
Yeah.
They did a study and 80% of blood donors had microplastics in their blood.
So the WHO says an average human being consumes 1 credit card worth of plastic
Yeah.
every week.
But that was a while ago. I think it's way more now.
Way more, yeah. And
because
these are
it's
coming from
found-
invisible sources. So
It's in
imagine a
breast
chewing
milk.
gum
It's in your stools. It's
yeah,
in
in your lungs, in your
it's
blood,
literally-
in the placenta. It's
Yeah.
everywhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So every time you open a bottled packaged bottled water, because of the friction between the cap and the top of the bottle, there's like tons of nanoparticles that go in. These are invisible. And that's with chewing gum. People are putting visible pieces of plastic into their mouth and then expecting not to ingest anything. So that's what we're kind of solving. So
Yeah.
there's so much nanoplastics, microplastics everywhere. And no AquaGuard, no Eureka Phobe skin, kind of filter that
filter
out.
through
Yeah,
that.
too
Too tiny.
less.
Yeah.
A microplastic is less than 0.5 mm small, so it's invisible to the naked eye.
Yeah.
Hopefully 6G will fry it out of my body.
Oh, yeah.
India is the largest producer of plastic or something, and the largest. There was something that came out
Yeah,
2
it's-
weeks ago.
yeah,
It's the
yeah,
largest
yeah.
producer of plastic.
Yeah, currently India is currently generating the most amount of plastic
Now,
waste in any other country.
I want to add an insight here. Is a friend of mine wanted to build in the bottled water space, right? And instead of doing plastic bottles or glass bottles, he wanted to do aluminum cans. And he over time realized that there is a mandate by the government saying that anything in an opaque medium cannot be called water. And this is because of large lobbies from brands like, I don't want to name them, because they're polluting our spaces with plastic. And that's the reason why. I mean, why can't water be sold in an opaque medium? If you want to put water
Yeah.
into an aluminum can, you can't call it water, you can call it a hydrating beverage.
What is
And
that?
that basically puts them off. And these are the same companies that are working on sustainable packaging in Europe, in the US, but they don't care about what goes into the landfills here in India. And the government turns a blind eye because they're getting paid well. So, I mean, it's dirty politics. And those it's not a dump yard. Our country is not a dump yard, guys. Come on, like.
Yeah. The other thing people assume sometimes is low-income countries and low-income people in general don't have the agency to make ethical decisions.
Correct.
So and that's one thing I dearly love to be a part of changing or
Yeah.
see change. And it's hard because you have to draw the line between solidarity and education, and it's very important to not come off from your privilege saying like, hey, you do this, you do that, it's so easy and stuff. But again, everybody I think fundamentally wants to do good as long as it's convenient. So that's maybe our
Goal.
jobs is to make it convenient.
Yeah.
And then let people choose anyway, because choosing Diet Coke is so easy today.
Yeah.
And
Because it's equally available.
Equally
Yeah.
available.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's just one example, but I'm sure a lot more exist.
My last question always is, what does sustainability mean to you?
You go first.
Yeah. Honestly, for me, it's giving hopefully the future generations the same quality of air, water, just gorgeous parts of this mother that we get to love, celebrate, and enjoy to future generations. So really, hopefully, not compromising the quality of their life, not just the immediate next generation, but many, many other generations to come. So yeah, people, planet, profit.
For me, I think it's more like all of us have an equal share on the resources of the planet, and just because a few people are rich doesn't mean you should abuse or have multiple assets which are unnecessary, right? So if you could equally just utilize how much is your share, your fair share on the planet, that's my example of sustainability. Like,
I think that answer is very personal and varies person to person. For me, it's definitely veganism. But what is very exciting to me about sustainable future is like this techno-futurist utopia where like we've achieved energy generation. We're a multi-planetary species. We have a Dyson sphere around a few stars. It's so captivating. One of my favorite movies, Interstellar, and I'm just so caught by this idea of what's out there. What can we do as a species? And I think it's impossible to do it without sustainability being at the very center of it.
yeah.
If you think about it, like it's so much more sustainable to feed astronauts lab-grown meat and lab-grown milk or plant-based food rather than taking animals into space, right? I mean, you can power year-long missions on nuclear fusion, whereas on fossil fuels, maybe there is a limit to how much you can do. So the universe has so many wonderful answers, and science and technology will unlock it, and that is so captivating to me. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for doing this with me today, and thank you for all of the work that each one of you do individually with the beautiful companies that you're building that are
Thank you
better
for
for our
having us here.
planet.
Yeah,
This was
thank you for having
incredible,
us.
and thank you for inspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs that know that business can be a force for good and should be a force for good, and people, planet, profit can go hand in hand. So thank you so much.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
for having us.
We had a
This was so much
blast. It was
fun.
fun.
This is super fun.
Yeah.
Wow.